What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Candice Evans, and today we're going to talk about a loaded topic. Over the summer, audiences grew familiar with numerous personalities while stuck at home. Jason Derulo dazzled TikTokers with his corn on a drill video. Jennifer Aniston nearly broke Instagram each time she posted a picture with Courtney Cox and Lisa Kudrow. And Carol Baskin's role in the documentary Tiger King captivated us so much that she landed a gig on Dancing with the Stars. These entertainers, among others, are household names because of their craft, whether it be starring in the latest Netflix documentary or breaking their teeth on TikTok. Summer 2020 provided us with a few other household names who didn't get their fame through their craft. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Elijah McClain became household names not because of an accomplishment, but because they were wrongfully killed by the police. The possibility of becoming a household name because of wrongful death is a harsh reality that the Black community consistently is reminded of. Summer 2020 painted a caricature of that reminder. Throughout the summer, news networks, reality television shows, and even children's channels made an effort to educate and bring awareness to the Black plight in America, utilizing Black voices. The same Black voices that are often called during these times of racial unrest are not called upon when racial tension isn't trending. Black representation within positions of authority is scarce within many professions. Professional athletes, particularly the WNBA, NBA, and NFL, are among the few professions where Black representation is the norm. Black men and women within these leagues are household names because of their craft. They are the consistent visibility of Black success for Black boys and girls. They are household names for the right reason. The scarcity of Black representation makes their voices so important, and they know that. Athletes like LeBron James, Naomi Osaka, they are consciously using their platforms to educate and inspire, yet they are consistently met with backlash. Audiences choose what they want to see. We love when pop stars post their reactions to big-time movies, or even when a politician drops their March Madness bracket, yet athletes are told to shut up and dribble. Why is it that singers are able to comment on films? Shouldn't they stick to vocals? Why is it that politicians can talk about sports? Shouldn't they stick to politics? I was able to speak with Academy of the Arts professor and women's head basketball coach Krystle Evans about athlete activism, Black representation within administrative roles, and the identity of being Black and an athlete. Take a look. Hey, Coach, thank you for joining me today. And just for introduction, we have Coach Krystle Evans, UCLA alumni, former assistant coach at Cal State Dominguez Hills, UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara, and Southwest Community College for the culture. How has your day been, Coach?
It's going pretty well. Been on 2 Zooms, one for compliance, another for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee here at Academy of Art University. And so that's outside of an academic Zoom meeting with one of my players. And so this is the 4th Zoom of the day with a 30-minute break, but Pepsi on my side.
Yes, and I have a wild cherry Pepsi on my side. Hopefully you don't have Zoom fatigue. I know that is a common theme within these first few weeks of school. So, Coach, just to get started, I really want to know about you. So how was your journey from Audubon Middle School to university administration and head coaching?
Wow, that's a loaded question. You're probably the first person to ask me about my journey starting in middle school. But you know what? I'm teaching a class right now on the experience of African-American athletes in the media. And I touched base about how our foundation shapes the way we view things today. And that starts with Audubon Middle School for me. My 8th grade final exam, we had to watch Roots. And as an alum of Audubon, I'm so proud that all of our instructors took the time to make sure we understood the significance of Black history being a part of American history. Because going from Audubon to Pacific Palisades and being one of 5 African Americans in the gifted magnet for my graduating class at that time, without having that foundation and that basis of you come from a culture of excellence, there's no losing in your blood. It just gave me a level of self-esteem and confidence to conquer the world as a minority. And then to transfer from Palisades to Crenshaw, where Palisades equipped me with the analytical skills and advanced technology that my schools in my closer to my hometown may not have had access to. I was able to go back and inform all of my classmates, like, there is more for us to do. There's other ways we can do this. There's resources for us. Even challenge some of my instructors in a positive way to create a community of learners in my neighborhood. And then go from Crenshaw to UCLA, and again, starts all over again. My graduating class had 0.2% African Americans, and being able to lean back and reflect on your foundation from Audubon to Palisades to Crenshaw and having the best of both worlds, I felt equipped to tackle those challenges of being Black at a predominantly white institution. As soon as I graduated from UCLA, I started coaching at Southwest Community College. I coached there for 5 years before going on to UC Santa Barbara and Irvine and Dominguez Hills and now Academy of Art. Being able to coach and be an administrator and solve conflict, whether it's based off of race, whether it's based off of gender, just to bring some level of understanding and continue to help young people mature and grow in ways that I didn't imagine as a young person. But it all starts with your foundation. And so overall, as an administrator and as a coach, I just try to be that person that I wish I had and extend and elaborate on the lessons that I learned from the individuals I did have, you know. And so you learn from the mistakes of others, but you can also expand on the good of others as well. And I hope that answered your question, but that's my full journey.
Definitely. How do you feel that journey have shaped you as a coach and administrator?
You know, I would say being inquisitive as a young person, I never had people just shut down my questions or my thoughts. It was always encouraged, and I was always challenged to dig deeper and to want to learn more and want to know more and to ask tough questions to further progress as a young person. And so being awarded that privilege, I want to extend the same to all of my young people that I'm around. Instead of shutting them down when they ask why, I tell them why before they can even ask. You know, that is my approach to administration. That's my approach to coaching. We're going to run this offense because this is how I see you thriving in it, whether it's you playing in this position, are you learning this role? Hey, we're going to have this leadership development program because I see the void on our campus, and I heard your voices when you said you would like to learn more about X, Y, and Z. And so having people see something in me and encourage me to continue to ask questions and to grow. I use that same approach with my student athletes and even with my peers, other fellow faculty and coaches. What is it that you want to see? What is it that you want to learn? What is your ideal environment? And take it upon myself to create that.
Okay. So as a coach, you've coached at Animo, South LA, View Park, Southwest, UC Santa Barbara, now you're at ArtU. What have you noticed about administrative positions as you've coached at these different schools with much different demographics?
How transparent am I allowed to be?
As transparent as you're comfortable being.
The common thread is that there's a large percentage of people of color in positions of entertainment when it comes to players. And there's a lower percentage of people of color at the decision-making table. And so to answer your question, from Southwest Community College to Santa Barbara to Dominguez Hills here, Irvine, you name it, the number of African-American women at the administrative level was always extremely low. The number of African-American women who were playing the sport was always extremely high. The number of African-American women who were head coaches was always extremely low. The number of African-American women as assistant coaches was pretty high. And so something that I've noticed is that in order to encourage women of color, particularly African-American women, to continue to advance in the field, we need for them to see that there are positions for them after they play. There's not enough of us in these positions to encourage them that, or to even get them to believe that there is life after basketball in the field of athletics, whether it's being a sports information director, involved in communications and telling the stories of our athletes, to being a senior woman administrator as myself, or to being an athletic director. You know, on the West Coast alone, I can't name off the top of my head. I would really have to dig if we have more than 5 African-American female athletic directors with all 3 divisions.
Wow. Did not take that into account. I'll definitely look that up after this. So you mentioned your graduating class at UCLA had a very low percentage, less than 1% of Black students walk the stage. What did that say to you at that young age?
Lift as we climb. You know, when you have the privilege of being a part of 0.2% of anything, you can look at that as, ooh, I made it, and I'm just going to play it safe and make sure I get through, and that's all that matters. Or you could take it as a challenge and say, I've learned how to not only be a part of the 0.2%, but how to grow it. You know, and so the main thing I learned was how to navigate institutions that weren't thinking of African Americans or people of color in general in its beginning. You know, it's not necessarily saying that the school itself is racist, but when we talk about structural racism and the intention and the beginning of how things were created, we have to have an honest conversation about the intentions of our founders. And when we do that and we learn what it was, now you can actually learn how to combat it. And when it comes to UCLA being part of 0.2% African Americans in that graduating class, I was involved in a program created by the vice provost to go into inner city high schools and teach young people what it takes to be admitted into the UC system. So we taught them the application process, taught them what a successful personal statement looked like, taught them what type of community service efforts were highly rated in the application process, the difference between a self-serving community service project versus a serving community service project that'll get them higher scores. And these are different tricks of the trade that is a part of the hidden curriculum that's not provided to people of color in certain areas. And you said, what did you learn? You learn to lift as you climb. Once I'm informed and once I get a piece of information, I go back and share it with people who aren't privileged to receive that information up front.
So how did that shape the way you maneuvered in professional spaces post UCLA?
To never, ever depend on one stream of knowledge, you know? And so to directly answer your question, post UCLA, I never wanted to be put in a box. If something were to happen to my athletic career like it did at UCLA, what's my backup plan? And what's my backup plan to my backup plan? You know, it encouraged me and empowered me to move forward in my academic career. I'm not going to just get a BA, I want a master's. And after my master's, I want my PhD. And while I'm going through this journey, I want people to see me doing it. I'm not going to stop coaching. I'm not going to stop being involved in my sorority. I want the collegiate members of my sorority. I want my players. I want the other athletes to see, wow, coach has to go to study hall for herself from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. And then she works from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then she does her homework from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Oh, this is how she conquers time management. This is how she navigates these different systems. While we're in it together, it becomes more feasible. I can do it too because I saw her do it while she was doing it. It just wasn't the end accomplishment. It's like, oh, she got that. It was like, no, not only did she receive it, this is what it took for her to get it.
Definitely. So when you're in your professional spaces, do you feel that your colleagues and fans who support your teams, do you feel like they view you as Krystle Evans from South Los Angeles, Cougar Pride, or as Coach Krystle, the person behind a source of entertainment?
That's a loaded question because I think it depends on the space that you ask that individual. You know, I think if you were to ask people in the Crenshaw district, it's exactly what you said in the beginning. Oh, that's Krystle Evans, pride of Crenshaw High, go Cougars. If you were to ask someone from Academy of Art, I could have on a Crenshaw shirt. And that's the last thing that's acknowledged. That's Krystle Evans. She's in her final year of her PhD program, and she just started the curriculum for our first ethnic studies class here at the Academy of Art. You know, she's the head coach for women's basketball, and she went to UCLA. But for some reason, my foundation is normally overlooked. It's as if I'm one of the special ones per se, you know. Where at Crenshaw, it's like, yeah, she is special, but she's us, you know. And so I think the quote unquote fan base is quite diverse, and it's all support, but that support is situated within the context of where that particular fan is based.
Okay. As a coach, do you feel the fans who support your team view your athletes as holistic students or vessels of entertainment?
I still say it's based on wherever they are. You know, it depends on their level of awareness. You know, when I talk about my players, it's even hard for me to just say my players. I consider all of my players my family. And so if I'm talking to you about one of my children or one of my younger sisters or one of my extended daughters, the first thing I'm going to say, let me use Lily Perkins as an example. My Lily is one of the best photographers you'll ever meet. She's up and coming. She's already covered the Pac-12 network media day. She's done some work for the Los Angeles Sparks. She has been with Pass the Ball and covered some tournaments for them, and she hasn't even graduated yet, let alone she's a dynamic basketball player. She already made honorable mention for All Pac West. But the first thing I'm going to talk to you about with Lily is her drive, her passion, her natural talent for photography before I ever mention the basketball part. You know, if I were to talk to you about Alyssa Munn, my freshman, little Alyssa, she's so fresh in the sense that she's a landscape architecture major because she wants to incorporate diversity in open spaces and land. And she wants to use structures, literal structures within communities to build spaces that are inclusive, let alone a dynamic point guard. But their talent on the court is the last thing I'll ever mention. But if you were to ask a fan, if they don't follow us on social media and see that we always talk about the person first and the athlete second, if they only care about the athlete first, that's all they're going to talk about, regardless of how much we're talking about how they are as people. If you're talking about a true fan who is truly invested in not just our wins and loss records, but in the welfare of these young people and in the welfare of the program itself, then they'll follow the same language and use the same language that we use. They're more than athletes, they're people. You know, people first, athletes second, student first, athlete second. But from a fan, if they only want to be entertained and not be engaged in this process of what athletics is really about, then that's all they will be, is what they choose to see.
Definitely. So you wear a multitude of hats: administrator, head coach, member of Delta Sigma Theta, sister, daughter, I can go on and on. But before any of that, you are a Black woman. How important do you feel Black women's voices are in positions of leadership?
I think Black women, it's without a doubt that our voices are important, that the visual of us being in these positions are important. I think it's even more important that we recognize we have a responsibility to uplift and develop more African American women to be in these positions. So our roles, how important they are, they're extremely important in the sense that we still have the lowest percentage. And we're put in a position to where, historically speaking, it's not just about leadership positions, but just in general within the structure of the African American household and family, we are taught and conditioned to uplift our men and push them in the forefront for levels of security and confidence and masculinity. And when you're conditioned to think that way, it's, yes, I'm just as talented. Yes, my voice is just as powerful, but I don't want to necessarily step on your toes. while still uplifting other women and our own children in a sense. That's a craft, that's a talent in itself, to be able to instill confidence in others while still maintaining your own dignity and integrity. So in one facet of things, that's a part of our role. And then the other part is, how do I manage my emotions where I don't come off as the angry Black woman? And that's not just with white men, where in my field, athletics is particularly from the administrative level, it is still a higher percentage of older white men in the athletic director role. After that, you'll start seeing Black men. It's like we're always last. And how do you manage that where, okay, something goes wrong and they can't figure it out? Then it's like, let me call on you now to clean it up and fix it. And I fix it, and I'm gonna still give you the credit, because in the back of my mind, I'm still conditioned, and society is still conditioned to put our men in the forefront and not to cause any problems, or you look mad, or you look angry. To uplift and empower someone else to fulfill these roles, we have to bring a certain level of value there, where we're not just a symbol, we're not just a token. We are at the decision-making table. We are helping individuals. We are uplifting other people. We are playing the political game because we understand our history and where we're traditionally placed. But we have to make sure other people after us are able to do the same thing and even better. Can they advance where we are? If this is how I feel, like, hey, we're always last, and this is what we typically have to do. Can they get us to where we're now second to last, or third to last, or even in first place? I know that's a loaded answer, but I hope I gave you some level of understanding in terms of my expectation of the role of African American women in administration.
Definitely, and it's definitely needed. As a former player and a coach, how do you feel when you hear the phrase "shut up and dribble"?
Shut up and dribble is the most insulting phrase or statement you can have as an athlete or as a coach. The history of athletics is not a secret. When we even talk about the slave athlete, the thought process was you have one job, and that's to work for your owner or to entertain your owner. And so when I hear shut up and dribble, that's the first thing I think about. I'm only a source of entertainment to you. I take it upon myself. You'll see me at times, if I'm on social media, I'll tweet more than an athlete. In high school, we didn't have Twitter, but we would talk about being more than a dumb jock. The reality is we're more than any stereotype you could throw to us as a culture, whether that's an athletic culture, whether that's an African-American culture, whether that is womanhood itself. I am not one that you can keep in a box. I am astute, I am knowledgeable, and I will speak my mind, and it's always going to come from a place of knowledge. I won't say something I haven't researched.
Definitely. When you see athletes like Jaylen Brown and LeBron James use their platform to foster conversation and growth in regards to race relations, how do you feel?
I feel if we have a platform, it is our job to responsibly use it to raise awareness. It's kind of like, as a coach, a parent of one of my players could tell them something 1,000 times, and my player may choose not to listen because it's tone deaf. Like, I hear mom and dad say this all the time. But when I say it, it's like, ooh, Coach K said X, Y, and Z. And that parent can call me, thank you, because I've been telling them this for years, but now that you said it, they listen. It's the same thing with athletes and celebrities with their platform. Mom and dad tells you one thing, it's okay, through one ear, not the other. LeBron James, Jaylen Brown, Maya Moore, they say it, it's like, oh, wow. Because they're in a place where it's not like children are saying we don't want to be in the same place as our parents, but it's different where it's, oh, that's something I really want to do. That's the field I want to be in. That's the person that I admire or I aspire to be. If they say that, there's some truth to it. Or I'm going to model that behavior because I'm trying to get there.
Okay. As a coach, speaking of someone who models behavior, as a coach, how are you facilitating conversations of race relation with your team?
We have genuine check-ins. It's a part of our everyday conversations. I'm not going to normalize hashtags. Tuesday, anniversary of the 4 little girls for the 16th Street church bombing. Before social media was even thought of, that's one of the first hashtags. They already had a tagline, the 4 little girls, you know, and then we fast forward to common modern day history and we talk about the Charleston 9 hashtag, you know, and we just roll it off our tongues like this is something that's normal. And so if it's a constant, not a trend, but it's something we see every day, just the same way you talk about how you brush your teeth or wash your hair, or you about to go see a movie, as routine that is, then talking about race relations, because it's happening every day, should be just as routine. It's just a part of our everyday language. And so if it's in a squad chat for our text messages and something happened, we put in the squad chat. Well, what are you thinking about this? What is it that we're seeing? Hey, I know this is something that you're pretty passionate about. I just wanted to check in with you. You know, did this trigger you? How you feeling? You know, and vice versa. My players check in with me like, hey, coach, you know, we saw this today and it made me think about you. How you feeling? Are you okay? In the spring, it was so many things, spring and summer, so many things happening back to back, in particular about race relations that were a lot more blatant and normal, just because people had more time on their hands and nothing else that they could possibly do but sit in front of their screens and have to be forced to watch what was happening. And so Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, it was like less than weeks apart, just bang, 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 bang. And I texted my team and just said, hey, you know, it doesn't even feel appropriate to say, hey, are you good? Because none of us can be good right now, you know? And so I know I said something to the extent, I feel like Erykah Badu, when she says, you better call Tyrone, she opens up and she's like, fellas, how you feeling out there? Ladies, are you all right? It was never, are you good? I just refuse to normalize this behavior in that sense, but I do want to normalize checking in with your loved ones when you see something that you know will stir their spirits. And that is my approach with my players. I'm just checking in with my family because I know this is something, because I know they're decent human beings where it would stir your spirit, that is something that would upset them, you know? And so something that I know would upset my younger sister, I'm gonna call her, hey, I saw this. I know you may have seen it too. Are you okay? And we just let the conversation flow however that goes.
Definitely. It sounds like you're providing much needed support to your players during these times. How are you being supported during these times by your colleagues, particularly your white colleagues?
Well, I think COVID-19 forcing us to have to sit and reflect and see what's happening in society in ways that we normally haven't had to, has forced some of my colleagues to do some deep reflecting. I've heard from a couple of them when things were first happening in regards to protests, and particularly George Floyd's death. It was just so public. I heard from a few just in terms of, hey, I'm just checking in. I can honestly say that didn't happen until I voiced the obvious, that the African American coaches and administrators checked in on each other, but we see this on a day-to-day basis and we can't stop it alone. And the people you would think would check in on us didn't. And once I said something to that extent, that's when I started to hear from more of my colleagues, but it was just more so of a lack of awareness and a lack of confidence in terms of how to approach African Americans at a time like this. If you in the past chose to ignore these situations, or you really just weren't aware with how bad it was, once you became aware, it's like, what do I do next? So to say, how have I been supported? I can be honest with you and say I haven't been supported. But I also think that also goes back to, what does it mean to be an African American woman? We are always the last to be supported. We support each other. We're not normally supported by others. And so you learn how to keep a smile on your face and continue to progress and do what is necessary to, quote unquote, play the game. I'm supported by my family. I'm supported by my close circle. I'm reminded by them that it is necessary not to take on every challenge of the world, that it's necessary to do your own check-ins with yourself, just like you would with your players and other people, but in terms of white administration, it hasn't been, let me check on you or let me support you. It's been more along the lines of, what should we do to make sure our students of color aren't angry? Or if they are angry, how can we fix it? Can you create a program for this? But it has never been, how can I help you?
So when you voice needing support, was that conversation easy?
It's never easy, because if you're conditioned to, especially it's twofold, in athletics, women athletics isn't a revenue generating sport. They're not revenue generating sports. And so typically speaking, you have to not make any quote unquote trouble. It's like, just be happy that you even exist. Don't make any noise. You guys don't bring in any money anyway. So let's just get through, and so knowing that, it's always in the back of your mind, oh, should I say something about this? Because I'm really just trying to last. I got to pick and choose my battles. Those conversations aren't even easy conversations. And you had asked, what did you learn post UCLA? Like, what were you inspired to do from there? And I mentioned continue to get more education and make sure people see me doing it. I found strength in knowing that basketball and athletics are my only talents, and that I have other credentials to make sure that I'm safe if I were to be in any type of trouble for saying something that's against the norm in my field. And that might sound really, really sad, but it's the sad truth. I found power in saying, hey, we're not doing enough when it comes to race relations, because I knew if I lost my job, I could be a full-time faculty member. I could teach full-time. I could go into consulting. I found strength in that. But I wasn't confident in a sense that I wouldn't be looked upon differently on a senior staff level, or that I could be blackballed, for lack of better words, for speaking out in a way that may not be easy to receive.
Definitely. So what impact do you believe white voices can have during these times?
I think SWV, and this is going to sound extremely corny, but it's the truth. They have a song where in the lyrics it says, the problem and the cure is you. If you listen deeply when they are belting out those words, you probably didn't realize that's what they said, but when the problem and the cure is you. In this case, when it comes to race relations, we can't ignore the history of the United States. We can't ignore the history of slavery, and that systemic racism was birthed out of it. And the people who created, and not necessarily you were there, but those who have benefited from these problems, from these structures, and from white privilege, are the ones who are going to have to self-check these spaces where they're the only ones allowed. I had this conversation with my boss, and I'll say this on air. I don't feel like anyone in my department is racist, but I do feel that there's too many of them who are not anti-racist. Meaning on that golf course where there are certain things that are being stated that we know are inappropriate and are just flat out racist. Are you saying, hey, that's racist, please don't say that? Or making sure like they know you can't be comfortable saying that around me? Or are you just quiet, which makes you complicit? When we recognize discrimination, whether it's something as simple as who's voted on first team all team to how many scholarships are awarded to each sport, all these different structures where people of color are sometimes not invited to those conversations. Are you even recognizing that and doing something about it? Or are you just staying complicit with your place of privilege? So until quote unquote allies take action. There's no allyship without action. I know I tweeted that today, and I gave an example of Bojangles with I'm losing it. Shirley, help me out here. Oh my God. Child actress, and I'm gonna think of it as soon as we're done. Or even let's go to Mr. Rogers in the Neighborhood. You know, these are allies in a sense. Shirley Temple, but they're allies in a sense, and what makes them allies is in a time where, oh, okay, Bojangles can't touch her hand, or we don't want you drinking from the same water fountain. And they use their platforms to say, not only am I going to touch your hand, I'm going to make sure the world see me doing it and nothing happened to me. And we're happy and we're safe together. You know, that's action. That's action, you know. And until that happens, because we're not in those spaces typically, people of color typically aren't in those spaces. And it has to take one of them to help us move forward. You know, let's take race out of it. In order for, we can't even talk about Black men. You know, we make this an issue when we're just strictly talking about hierarchies and privilege. In order for Black women's voices to be respected, and if we're strictly saying Black men, Black women, it's going to take Black men to check other Black men to invite women into those spaces of respect. It's going to take white people to check white people to incorporate Black people in those spaces, you know. And so allyship is extremely important, but it can't be performative. You have to be just as bold and just as courageous as those of us who've had to deal with the consequences of systemic racism for all these years. Without action, there's no allyship. Without allyship, there's no progress. It's a lot of movement, but there's no progress.
Definitely. Before we move into this next segment, I must ask, did you see the George Floyd video?
I did.
Okay. What were your initial thoughts when you saw George Floyd killed on camera?
My initial thoughts was, what makes George Floyd different from Emmett Till? Like, why are we acting like this isn't the norm? You know, and I felt bad because I look back at how shocked people around me, how shocked they were. And they were shocked, and I was frustrated by the fact we're trying to act like this is new. And I was disheartened that I never felt like things were going to change. I watched it and I just said to myself, I am hurt for his family because those cops are going to get off. And I'm giving you my most raw and honest initial reactions.
So along with Mr. Floyd, the national media also began to cover the wrongful killings of Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, and we were just getting the arrest of Ahmaud Arbery's murderers. So much was going on while we were all stuck in the house. As a Black woman, how did you feel seeing all of these cases unravel?
As a Black woman, seeing all of these cases unravel, I just said to myself, here we go again. You know, here we go again. You know, I referenced the 4 little girls, and then we go into the Charleston 9. You know, at the Charleston 9, we're seeing gay nightclubs getting shot up. You know, from there, we hear Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Eric Davis, the list goes on. For me, it was like, how am I supposed to feel? We have seen so much of this throughout the history of our lives, of our being, of our people, where for me, it was just like, oh, okay, check. Don't wear hoodies in certain neighborhoods of Florida, check. Don't make sure my blinkers work and everything else when I'm driving around, no Sandra Bland, check. Oh, make sure, you know, when I go into a store, I just know my whole surroundings. You know, anything could happen, check. Like, what else do I need to teach my niece and my nephew that's not in our manual of living while Black? I can't say I had any feelings of anger, of rage, of frustration, of hurt, we live with that on a day-to-day basis, and we've been taught how to live with that and how to continue to just balance the waves of our emotion. My mind went to strategy. How do I make sure the people I love the most survive in the confines of this thing we call our world?
How did you facilitate conversations with your team about these moments?
Keep your butts in the house, because these curfews are no joke, and you can't be the next hashtag. A bullet doesn't have a name on it. And that's the honest to God truth. You know, I talked about those check-ins we do on a regular basis. You know, that's a given for my family, my basketball family. But then it came protection mode. You know, it's like, I don't trust our leadership in the White House. I don't tell my players how to feel in regards to politics, but we do talk about safety. And at that particular time, it was not safe to just walk around and think that that curfew wasn't a big deal in the different locations that they live. As young people, sometimes we feel like we're invincible, or, you know, oh, they can't be that serious. And so I just took it upon myself as to educate them on the fact that this is serious, and hey, those rubber bullets hurt too.
Yes, they did. What were your words to your Black players who saw a woman who looked like them murder go unresolved?
Well, my first message to all of my players, but particularly my Black players, was what's hurting you the most right now? And I posed that question. So what hurts you the most right now? Is it that you don't feel like Breonna Taylor's murderers are ever going to be charged, or the fact that it actually happened? And all of them said the fact they know her murderers won't be charged.
Yeah, that's nothing more to say. In the moment, what did you feel needed to be done?
From who?
From the Black community to start.
You know, from the Black community, it's more of a question of what else can we possibly do? We teach our children how to talk to the police. We teach them how to dress so they won't be a target. We teach them, you know, the significance of education and how to combat institutional racism. We teach them all these different ways to live while being Black. And at the end of the day, no matter how many degrees, no matter how much money they make, they are still Black and have to live by the same playbook as someone in the inner city who may not have as much education or money. So it was the reality of what else is there that we could possibly do, you know? And so before, where it's like, yo, this is our problem, we're gonna fix it, my mind has shifted in that approach. Like, we didn't create this problem. We were born into it. The ones who created it, you need to fix it. Help us. We'll help you fix the problem you started. You know, again, I hope I answered your question. I know I'm throwing a lot at you right now, but this is my truth. You know, as a Black community, we didn't do this. We didn't do it. We don't place blame on anybody. We just state facts. We're at a place now where, you know, we just want to be able to live. I think that people should be extremely happy that the majority of the Black community is not seeking revenge. We're just seeking equality.
Definitely. How did your university respond to the civil unrest brought on by these cases in the moment?
Most of our students weren't on campus during the time of civil unrest, and so there wasn't a call to action in terms of housing or safety or things of that sense. They did send out a statement to acknowledge that diversity is significant and important at the Academy of Art University. Students who voiced concerns about lack of ethnic study courses at the Academy met with our Vice President of Curriculum, Eileen Everett, and she took the time to meet with anyone who wanted to talk about ways we could be more inclusive in our curriculum or even on campus in general. As a result, my course was created. the history of African Americans athletes in the media. And Jan Yanahiro, our chair of the communications and technology major, she created and chairs the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And this was literally all born out of the civil unrest that has taken place, spearheaded by the Black Lives Matter movement and a call to action from our student body.
Okay. How did the Pac West respond during this time?
The Pac West continues to serve as a fiscal agent for programming and development of student athletes and coaches and administrators. You know, for myself, I received a grant from our conference to participate in a women's leaders NCAA Academy to further develop my leadership skills and tackle different aspects of athletics, including diversity and equity and inclusion. So that's one way the Pac West has responded, by being more aggressive in its fiscal capacity in terms of developing their the conference. In terms of actually saying like this is a message from the Pac West, there hasn't been as much information. I think I can't speak for the conference itself, but you know, I will say that each campus that makes up the Pac West have placed diversity and inclusion as a point of emphasis in its programming efforts through its SAC leadership teams. I'm a co-advisor for SAC this year, and we just had a meeting with SAC. So all of the SAC representatives in the conference were in this meeting, and each person referenced social justice, our diversity, equity, and inclusion as a point of emphasis for programming on their campus this year.
Okay. So you're back on campus, but the issues that highlighted the summer are still continuing, from protests, wrongful police shootings, the sports world stopped for a day. It's all still going on. How have you supported your athletes in the moment right now?
So we, programming is key. You know, this is a special year because not all of our athletes are back on campus either. You know, we're not even at the 50% mark yet with all athletes on campus. Our campus is hybrid. So our SAC committee is going to meet next week, actually, where we'll vote on officers, but we'll also have, we'll lay out our programming efforts. We know we're tackling voters registration. You know, that was something that we discussed prior to setting up our first SAC meeting. Outside of voters registration, we've already had a speaker come in and talk about Black Lives Matter, Dr. Tyrone Howard from UCLA, and just did a Q&A session with all the athletes where he gave his expertise and let them ask any questions they may have, or even just vent about how they may feel in this moment, and how to make sure that this isn't just a moment, but that we're actually a part of a movement. And so programming has been critical for us. You know, I've done individual check-ins on a personal level. You know, I'll pull up our whole database, not just with my players, but players within the entire department. It doesn't matter if they're a person or color or not, but I'll just call them and just say, hey, this is Coach K, head coach for women's basketball, senior woman administrator. How your first 2 weeks of school going? How you living? You know, how's life right now? How you feeling right now? It's a lot going on in the world. You need to talk. You know, our athletic trainers have done a pretty good job of doing mental health check-ins during a time like this. And so we have taken it from a three-pronged approach, in a sense, with mental health, personal development, and leadership development.
Okay. So when the George Floyd murder happened, people took the streets instantly. Meanwhile, Breonna Taylor's case took longer to gain the same recognition and outrage nationally. Why do you think that is?
Breonna Taylor wasn't related to Stephen Jackson. Stephen Jackson has a larger platform. He's a celebrity. It was something that hit close to home to him. It was his close friend. It was someone he considered a brother. he has a bigger platform. At the same time, where these different things take place, location is critical as well. You know, I think it's overlooked that Minneapolis has had problems, Minnesota has had problems, but when it comes to diversity and inclusion, the University of Minnesota is at the forefront in terms of its research. There's a lot of research on diversity, social justice, equity, whether it's within athletics or outside of athletics. The University of Minnesota does a great job of producing and publishing literature and professors and just intellectuals in the field of equity. And for that to take place there, you know that they were going to rally the troops in a way that was extremely critical and conscious, you know. And so transfer that over to Kentucky, that's not really the case, you know. And so location is huge, platforms and who's connected to who is true is huge. And then we got to talk about intersectionality as well. We talked about different levels of privilege. To be a white male is at the top. Black men are next. Women at that totem pole is towards the bottom, you know. And the unfortunate truth is Breonna Taylor is a Black woman. And as Black women, it's as if our innocence is gone by the time we're 11 years old. And when things happen, it's just another thing that breezes over in the newspaper. And the first thought is she must have done something wrong. She must have worn the wrong thing. She must have been too mouthy, something with her hair, something with her earrings. It's never wrong is wrong and right is right. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm biased because I'm a Black woman. I'm just speaking the facts when it comes to the problems of men versus women. When we talk about positions of privilege, women is at the bottom. Women are at the bottom.
Interesting. The WNBA, speaking of women, has seemingly always been ahead of the curve when it comes to issues of race relations, yet they are not getting the same recognition by national media. Why is that?
We're going back to intersectionality, and now you're even intensifying it because you have not just Black women or women in general, but predominantly Black women, a league of predominantly Black women. You also throw in the percentage of lesbians or out lesbians in that league. And unfortunately, in our society, when we talk about intersectionality and we talk about race, we talk about gender, and now in this case, we talk about sexuality, it is so easy to create excuses to cause a distraction from what is right and what is wrong. And the women of the WNBA have been at the forefront from day one, you know, not just with Breonna Taylor, not with just George Floyd, with any level of injustice, any level of inequity or inequality. WNBA has been there since its inception, you know, and the reality is because it's the women of the WNBA, the statements are ignored or is fluffed over or is used to attack them for utilizing their voices from all segments, you know, whether it's Andre Iguodala telling Ariel Powers to be happy, he just tweet about her, to, you know, Southern white men in their Twitter comments telling them to shut up or nobody want to watch them play anyway, or, you know, talking about their sexuality, you know. And so I was talking about this with a friend of mine who had asked, you know, without trying to be disrespectful or ugly, but just have an understanding of defund the police and what it means. And she was saying like, hey, you know, if they keep saying defund the police, is going to scare off people because they don't understand what that really means. And my response is, even if we explain what it means, if we say they're really just saying redistribute funds to other programs to help the communities, those same folks who saying, oh, we just don't like how you're saying it, or, oh, that just sounds dangerous, they're folks who never cared about these issues in the first place, already had their minds made up and don't want to hear anything else, period. You know, and it's the same thing for the WNBA. They could say it in different ways, they could tweet about it in different ways, but it's because it's coming from them and the way society has been conditioned to view women who look like them, who talk like them, who move like them. The messages aren't being received. And the NBA followed suit and copied everything the WNBA had already done or thought of, stole some of their ideas and used it, and they're being praised for the same thing these women have been demonized for.
Definitely. What does the phrase "more than an athlete" mean to you?
More than an athlete means that I'm more than any stereotype that the majority who doesn't look like me have placed on me. It means I'm not going to accept your place-based identity concepts on me. I'm not going to embrace what you tell me is what I'm about or what my culture is about. I'm not going to be distracted by what you force upon me. It means that I'm more than just a dumb jock. It means that I'm more than what you tell other people that I am as well. It means that I am in charge of my own story. I am the narrator of my own life.
Definitely. So you're a coach and a former athlete, but you are a Black woman first. Do you feel that your colleagues and fan bases see that?
Absolutely not, which is why I remind them every day. I am unapologetically Black, woman, and educated. And at the end of the day, when my basketball career is over, when my coaching career is over, when my career is over as an administrator and as a professor, I will still be Black. I will be Black in my casket.
Do you feel that Black athlete voices are needed in these conversations?
I feel like all Black voices are needed in these conversations. And I say that even the most ignorant of voices like Candice Evans. It's needed in the sense that if it's one-sided and all these different perspectives aren't analyzed, how can we teach people how to not be disagreeable? Because when we come from different backgrounds, different upbringings, there's a level of understanding there and respect there that can be developed. If all of us think the same, how can we ever learn? So all these different perspectives need to be analyzed. There's something you can gain from all of them. It doesn't mean you agree, but when can we teach people how to disagree?
Definitely. Tell me about the More Than an Athlete fundraiser that you were a part of.
Well, one of our student athletes, Dante Williams on our men's basketball team, Dante is from Compton, California. He went to high school in Long Beach, California. And when George Floyd was murdered, it struck a chord with Dante, and he started reflecting and asking, how is he viewed as an African-American athlete? Am I just an athlete or am I a person? Am I viewed the same way off the court as I am on the court? Does these things matter? And what is it that administration feel about me as well? Do you support me? Are you willing to protect me when I'm not in a uniform? And having these type of conversations with that young man, we both wanted to go out and protest at the time on behalf of George Floyd because, yeah, we're used to it, but it was a level of empowerment that came with George Floyd's death where it's like, you know what, there's something happened here where this isn't just another Black man being murdered by the police. Something's going to happen. You wanted to believe that. You want to be a part of that movement. COVID-19 numbers were rising at the time. We weren't flattening the curve. And again, as an administrator and as a coach, my initial thought is to always protect my athletes. And so when Dante was venting to me about how he was feeling and how he wanted to do more and wanted more from athletics, I pitched an idea to him about having a virtual movement where we could raise funds for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to help other Black victims of police brutality and go that route. Like, it's safe in the sense of we're not out there in the streets where we could get hit with a rubber bullet or get COVID-19, Lord forbid, whatever the case may be. It felt like the safer route, but also another way to get our voices heard and generate some funds. We talked about what made the civil rights movement so impactful. And it wasn't just the marches in the streets. It was the fact that Dr. King was educating those who participated in the movement in terms of hitting the dollars of people in positions of power, hitting their pockets in a sense. We're not utilizing your buses or utilizing your food places. And so Dante and I came up with the idea of the fundraiser after Black Tuesday. We did it that day. Black Tuesday, we were creating the fundraiser on the back end, putting together the flyers and calling different people to help us to be involved and creating a GoFundMe account. And right after Black Tuesday is when we launched it. And it was quite intentional. We knew we were going to release the funds, so the Legal Defense Fund, on Juneteenth. And we had asked for donations that symbolize Juneteenth. And so it just took off from there. You know, we utilized word of mouth, we utilized social media, but it came from the foundation of generating dollars while protesting.
Why did you choose the NAACP Legal Support Fund in particular?
Well, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, not only does it take on cases for African Americans that are facing police brutality, but they also make sure that they have a leg in their organization that takes pride in advocacy and education. And so they're educating the public on ways that you could be involved in this movement. And it's not just the George Floyd case or Trayvon Martin's case. It's everyday events that are happening throughout the country that all of us have to be educated on. It talks about local government versus national government, local elections, and how impactful they are. And so just that level of education and advocacy was extremely important to us. And we knew that the NAACP Legal Defense Fund plays a major role in a lot of these major cases that we have been seeing.
What was the reception to this cause?
It was huge. You know, within 2 weeks, we raised over $5,000, you know, and so to ask for $6.19, you know, and you end up raising over $5,000 in 2 weeks, and you get all this feedback of how empowered athletes felt across the country of different sports. You know, there were WNBA players who tweeted about the fundraiser and donated. There were former college athletes, there were coaches, there were administrators, and literally from different walks of life, different sports, different ethnicities, different genders, but they were all connected to the athletic field, whether it was loved ones of athletes or athletes themselves. But it was a protest version of FUBU. It was for us and it was by us.
So we're going to get into your class now. Over the summer, your institution implemented a new course in their communication department called The History of African American Athletes in Media, in which you are teaching. What does that class cover?
So this is actually week 2, and it has been quite an experience just within the first 2 weeks. But we are covering the experience of African American athletes from slavery to Reconstruction, from Reconstruction to civil rights, from civil rights movement to post-civil rights movement to the Black Lives Matter movement, what that looks like, you know. And so we define the Black athlete. We define the Black athlete week 1 within a theme of the power of our names, and talked about, you know, why is it, you know, and this wasn't a question, but it was birthed out of these questions. Why, as a people, we are critical of our names, and our parents have to be cautious of how they spell our names or what they name us. And is it because they want to make sure that we can have a job one day, or that we're more employable? And, you know, it is a diverse class. And so when they hear questions like that or comments like that from their Black peers, they're just like, oh my God, I never had to think that way to get a job, or go by a nickname to get a job, things of that sort. To the further development of why do we look at athletes just as forms of entertainment? You know, where did the stereotype of the quarterback having to be the smartest person in the field, which means they can't be an African American, come from? You know, and so we just chronicle the lives of African American athletes through the lens of where we are as a society in each era.
What do you want students to learn about being Black and an athlete from your course?
I want students to learn that as an African American culture and as an athletic culture, you have a responsibility to inspire, to uplift, to make an impact. I want them to feel empowered to do those things. I want them to know the sacrifices that's been made throughout the years for them to have the privilege that they have to continue to play the sport that they love, but the responsibility that they have to make it even better for anyone after them.
Do you feel like courses like these are important in higher education?
I do. I think that especially now, let's go back to what I touched upon about the four little girls versus the Charleston 9. Yesterday's lecture, I explained to my team, or Tuesdays, sorry, I explained to the team, and I do reference the class as a team or a squad at times. We try to keep the symbolisms of athletics within the course. Even for our non-athletes in there, they're an athlete for a day, for 3 hours. Here's the reality. When we take away or murder our children, like we witnessed in a bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, you're taking away the legacy and the future of a culture, of a people. And then when you see the grandparents who are murdered in the massacre of the Charleston 9, now you take away the history and a reference point of a people and a culture. So when you say, oh, they're out in the streets and they're looting, they're rioting, what they're protesting about now, well, you've taken away our youth and you've taken away our grandparents and our history. What do we have left? What do we have left? And so the reality is, are these classes important? Yes, they're important, because without a reference point, we don't know where we're going. These classes are even more important than astronomy and chemistry. You want us to learn these different formulas for science. There's a science to life as a person of color, and we need to know those same formulas.
Definitely. So I was stalking you on Twitter, and I found a tweet that you posted correcting ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. He wrote that the NBA games were postponed after the players walked off the court, and you corrected him saying that the players chose not to play. Why did you feel the need to correct the rhetoric in that moment?
It goes back to what I was explaining about in terms of the narrations of our life. It's like, if you're going to narrate a story, then you need to be correct. And it's a big difference between a choice that is within your control and something you are forced to do that is out of your control. And when it is publicized that the game is postponed, well, that took the power away from those players and it devalued the message they were sending. Those games were not postponed. The players chose not to play. They had the power because they get to determine whether the game is played or not by participating and recognizing that they are the capital in what is going on right now. And so that it was an important distinction. That same distinction is one of people who are enslaved and those who are slaves. A slave was forced. They were captured. They were forced into slavery. It wasn't voluntary in a sense. It's like, I was born into this, and this happened. But enslaved people, they were captured. It wasn't a choice. They were captured. And so when you just throw out this term like, oh, the slaves, or it's like you're just saying we chose to do it. But when you add those two letters, EN, to slave, now you recognizing, no, you forced us into slavery. We were captured. When you say postpone versus choice, again, you taken away our power, just like you did when you enslaved us.
How important do you feel an athlete's own narrative is?
I'm sorry, you said how important do I feel like an athlete's own narrative is? That was the question? I think it's extremely important in the sense of, if you can't tell your own stories and you trust someone else to tell it for you, it's just like that game telephone. By the time it gets to that third person, that story is going to be the exact opposite of everything you ever said or stood for.
In what ways can your white counterparts, like your fellow administrators or even other coaches within your conference, play the role of an ally during these times and moving forward?
I think all of us, particularly coaches in my conference, coaches in general, we have to first start having those uncomfortable conversations and self-reflections as people in authoritative positions. You know, as coaches, we hold people scholarships in our hands, and we got to recognize that can make them uncomfortable to tell their truth. You know, and we can't take that personal. And it's easy to do. Like, why would they think I would say something or do something if they were to tell me that it's not about us? It's their truth, you know. And I also feel like we have to do a better job of listening to each other to heal and not just to respond. And it goes back to what I referenced earlier in this interview in terms of not being disagreeable. You know, we all come from different walks of life. We are all in different places in our lives right now. And there's a lot to learn from those differences. When we can find value in each other's differences, right, wrong, or ugly, when we can look at, you know, the ugly truths embedded in our history as a country, embedded in our conferences, you know, these differences, then we can actually move forward in a healthy manner.
Definitely. Before we go, for a young Black athlete out there, what would you say to them about the power in their voice?
I would tell them to be unapologetically Black, be unapologetically athletic, be unapologetically you, but be the best version of that. And to understand the responsibility that comes with it, to not take it for granted. If you are going to say something, say it from a place where it is your truth and not something you're doing just to get more likes. It can't just be clickbait. It has to be your truth. It has to be something you truly believe in, and to be able to back it up. Because when you are the minority and you are saying something that the majority don't want to hear, you are a target. You are a target. And be able to catch each one of those stones that are going to be thrown at you and create the empire that you were born to lead.
Thank you for that, Coach. And thank you for joining me today. We had Krystle Evans, unapologetically Black UCLA alumni. Thank you again, Coach.